I remember the sound before I remember his face. It came at night, mostly. A muffled gasp, like a man swallowing a river, followed by silence, so thick it pulled the breath from the walls. Our house was old, post-war brick with thin wooden bones, the kind of place that settled at night like it was sighing. I thought it was the plumbing or the house dreaming. That's what I told myself, anyway. But even then, something in it felt too human, too wounded. It wasn't until much later that I understood what I was hearing. The sound my father made when he cried. He didn't do it often, but when he did, the whole world seemed to tip. I never saw him cry. He made sure of it. But I heard it, through the grate in the floor outside his room, where heat used to rise in the winter and secrets slid down like condensation on glass. I was 8 the first time I pressed my ear to the floorboard. My mother had gone out. I don't remember why, groceries or cigarettes, or just to breathe without someone watching. The house was too still. I wandered, restless. Then I heard it, soft, like the wind fumbling through curtains. I lay down, ear to the vent. What I heard was not a man sobbing, not the movie kind of crying. It was restraint, choked, a wet kind of silence. That's when the first image of my father was etched in me, not of his face, but of his breath catching like a door swinging on rusted hinges. The next morning he was his usual self, distant, mechanical. He poured my cereal and didn't say a word. When I asked him if he was okay, he just blinked like I'd spoken in a foreign tongue. He had hands like old bark, thick-knuckled, scarred, always smelling faintly of motor oil and pine. Even when he didn't work, he smelled like labor. I never saw him without calluses. He never hit me, not once. But he carried violence the way some men carry wallets, tucked in close, worn smooth from use. He spoke in short, measured words, not unkind, but clipped, like conversation was a tool he didn't trust. My mother said he wasn't always like that. She said he used to laugh. I didn't believe her, but I wanted to. There was a photo once, buried in the back of a drawer I wasn't supposed to open. My father, maybe 25, shirtless and grinning on the hood of a car. His arms were around a woman who wasn't my mother. She looked like summer, freckled shoulders, a Coke bottle in one hand, the other tangled in his hair. He looked like someone else, young, open. I stared at that photo for hours. When I finally asked him who she was, he told me not to go through his things. His voice wasn't angry, just hollow, like a bell rung in an empty field. I never asked again. The year I turned 10, he stopped coming home some nights. No explanation, just long silences where his boots used to be. My mother would say he was working late, but her voice wavered. She started smoking again. I'd find ash smudges on the kitchen counter on my homework. When he did come back, he smelled different, not like oil, like hotel soap and something floral, like he'd stepped out of a world that didn't include us. One night, I stayed up, waiting. The door opened at 2:07. He didn't see me in the dark hallway. I watched him pause in the entry, his hand still on the doorknob. He stood there for a full minute, not moving, just breathing. And then he cried, soft, silent, shoulders heaving with the effort of holding it. It was the closest I'd ever been to him in that state. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. Something in me knew I wasn't meant to witness it. He wiped his face, squared his shoulders, and walked past me without seeing. The smell of him lingered. That hotel soap, that strange, bright smell of someone else's life. The next morning, I asked if we could go fishing. He blinked again, like the words didn't compute. Then he said yes. We went to a lake he used to take me to when I was small. The air was thick with the scent of algae and wood smoke. I remember the way the boat creaked beneath us, the distant echo of loons calling across the water. We didn't speak, just cast and reeled. Cast and reeled. After a while he looked at me and said, "You know, when I was your age, I used to think crying made a man weak." I nodded, even though he wasn't asking. "But I think," he said, trailing off, "sometimes it's the only thing that proves you're still alive." He didn't look at me again, just turned back to the lake. That night, I didn't hear him cry, but I imagined, in my dreams, I heard the sound echoing through the vents. And I followed it through walls that weren't there, through memories that didn't belong to me. I never asked him what he was crying about, because I think I already knew. I just didn't have the words for it yet. But I would, and when I did, I'd write it all down. Even the parts I wasn't supposed to hear. I can still smell the street the day he didn't come back, not the day he left. That's a different story. No, this was before. This was the dress rehearsal. The warning shot fired into the sky while everyone pretends not to hear. Summer storm, steam rising from cracked pavement, the smell of something burnt underneath it all, like rubber or regret. My mother was standing at the sink, wrists wet, her hands deep in a sink full of silence. I was 12 and I knew by then not to ask. She didn't flinch when the clock hit midnight, didn't look up when the house shifted its weight like it was trying to hold its breath. The silence that night was different. Not the absence of noise, but the thick presence of something unseen. Like grief had a body, and it was sitting at the table, drinking from my father's cup. She lit a cigarette, even though the windows were closed. The smoke curled in the kitchen light like it was trying to write words only she could read. "Go to bed," she said, eyes on the dark beyond the window. I think she was waiting for headlights, hoping for the squeak of his boots, the rattle of his key, but there was only thunder, far off, and rain making its way down the gutters, like fingers tracing old lines on a worn face. I lay in bed that night with the window cracked just enough to let in the smell of the storm. It reminded me of the time we got caught in the rain together. Him and me, back when I was small enough to ride on his shoulder. We ran through a parking lot after a movie, and he laughed. Really laughed, as we got soaked. That laugh still lived somewhere inside me, even though I hadn't heard it in years. The next morning, he was in the kitchen, like nothing, like the night hadn't happened at all. "Morning, champ," he said, pouring coffee with the precision of a man trying to hold his hands steady. There was a tremble there though, just a flicker, like a string too tight. My mother didn't speak. She moved around him like he was a ghost she'd learned to live with, and I watched. He looked at me, and for a split second, his mouth twitched like he wanted to say something. Apologize maybe, confess, but all that came out was, "You sleep all right?" I nodded. He nodded back. It would have been better if he'd screamed, better if he'd thrown a chair, or broken something, or begged her forgiveness on his knees. But this pretending was worse. It was like watching someone drown and call it swimming. That day at school, I didn't speak. Not because I was angry. I didn't have the vocabulary for anger yet. Just a tightness in my chest that made it hard to breathe, like something small and sharp was caught between my ribs. That night, I sat by the vent again. No sound, just the soft hush of the TV downstairs, his voice low and deliberate as he told my mother about a job site. Something about cement drying too fast. She didn't respond. He coughed, the kind of cough that comes from somewhere deeper than lungs. Then I heard it. Not a cry, not even a gasp, just a breath held too long, followed by the sound of a chair creaking under the weight of someone falling apart very slowly. And I thought about that laugh again, the one from the rain. I couldn't make sense of how it was the same man. I began to wonder if maybe there were two fathers, one who carried me on his shoulders and let me steer imaginary planes through storm clouds, and another who came home late and cried into vents. Or maybe he was both, and maybe being both was killing him. There was a moment that month I will never forget. We were walking through the hardware store, fluorescent lights humming, aisles smelling of rubber hoses, plastic, dust. He picked up a wrench and held it like it was familiar, like it meant something. Then he handed it to me. "You feel that?" he asked. It was heavy, cold. "That's real," he said. "You always know what it is. No lies in tools. They do what they do." He was quiet for a while, then added, "I wish people were like that." I didn't know what to say. He looked at me for a long time, then ruffled my hair and walked away. I stared at the wrench in my hand. I felt like it was a question I didn't know how to answer. That night, I tried to cry. Not for him. Not yet. Just to see if I still could. But my face stayed dry. There was only that tightness, the first time I ever heard him laugh again. It was years later, and it wasn't real. It was too loud, too sharp. The kind of laugh that sounds like breaking glass. But I'll get there. Right now, I'm still 12, still waiting for a man to come home who never really left, but never really stayed. Still trying to name the smell of a storm that never passed. Still listening for that sound, the one my father made when he cried. Because once you hear it, you never forget it. It's like a song with no lyrics, just a feeling in the bones. And every silence after starts to sound just like it. It was autumn when the silence turned from heavy to sharp. Not a blanket anymore, but a blade. The trees were hemorrhaging color. Burnt ochres and bruised reds collected at the edges of the street. And every step through them made a sound like something fragile being crushed. That's what it felt like inside the house too. Every step, a crack. I was 13 the first time I saw my mother throw something. A coffee mug, bone white. It struck the far wall just above the couch where he sat, shattering like a firework and leaving a brown comet of coffee across the paint. He didn't move, didn't even flinch. He just sat there, staring at something that might have been the television, but his eyes weren't focused. They looked past it, like he was somewhere else. Maybe that hotel room I'd never seen, or back in the photo with the freckled woman who wasn't my mother. I stood in the hallway, halfway behind the door frame, my shadow stretched like a tether to a place I didn't belong. "Say something," she hissed. He didn't. She walked out, fast. Her keys jangled like a warning. The front door slammed. The sound of it echoed for a long time, until it was replaced by the quiet tinkling of ceramic pieces settling into the carpet. I stayed frozen. He lit a cigarette indoors, for the first time I'd ever seen. The sound of the lighter scratched against the silence, like a match dragged down bone. Smoke swirled toward the ceiling. I watched him exhale like it hurt, and then quietly, like someone speaking to no one, "I never meant to be this." I didn't know what he meant. Not then. I went to my room and closed the door, but I didn't turn the light on. I sat there in the half-dark, listening for him to cry. But he didn't. That was worse, the absence of it. At least when he cried he was still trying to feel something, still fighting. But this was surrender, and I didn't know how to hate him for it. Only how to fear what it meant. The next morning, the mug was gone, the coffee stain on the wall scrubbed to a pale ghost. My mother didn't speak as she made toast, the scrape of the butter knife against the bread loud in the vacuum. He came in and kissed her on the head. She flinched. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. Either way I saw it, and I knew something had cracked beyond repair. There were moments after that where we pretended, movie nights, family dinners, the ritual of normal, but it was like drinking from a cup you know has a crack. You feel the drip down your sleeve, the leak of something once whole. One night, he knocked on my door. That was rare. "Got a minute, sport?" I said nothing, but he came in anyway, sat on the edge of the bed like he didn't remember how small it was. "I've been thinking," he said. He didn't finish the sentence. I waited. He rubbed his palms on his jeans and stared at the ceiling. "I want you to be better than me." That was it. That's all he said. Then he left. The door didn't close all the way. That sentence hung in the air like a balloon I was afraid to touch. Like if I did it would pop, and I'd have to clean up what spilled out. He wanted me to be better. But how do you aim at a target when the man holding it won't stand still? I started writing then, just small notes, things I saw, fragments. My father at the sink, scrubbing his hands like the past could come off with dish soap. My mother staring too long at the television when it was off. Me, hiding glass from the carpet so no one would step on it barefoot. I didn't know what I was trying to understand, only that I had to try. That winter, he bought me a tape recorder, said he used to love music once, told me I should make some. I didn't know if it was a gift or a confession. I recorded things that weren't music: doors opening, rain on the roof, my own breath when I couldn't sleep. Once I tried to record him crying, but when I played it back, all I heard was static. It felt right somehow, like maybe grief isn't meant to be recorded. Or maybe it already was. Maybe it was in the cracks of the mug, in the imprint of his body on the couch, in the sound the front door made when it slammed and didn't echo back. I don't remember what he got me for Christmas that year, but I remember how he looked at me across the dinner table like he wanted to say something and couldn't. His eyes were rimmed red, not from crying, from not crying. There's a difference. You can drown from both. I'm not sure if he knew I was watching, but I was, and I was still listening. Because the silence was no longer empty. It was a map, and I was learning how to read it. There's something about Sundays that feels like waiting for bad news. It's in the light. Too soft, too gold. Like a lie whispered at the end of a long week. It's in the way the house sits heavier than usual. The floorboards aching. The clock ticking too loud. Even the air feels like it's holding its breath. We went to church that morning, all three of us like we used to when I was younger, and didn't know the words were empty. My father wore his old grey suit. The collar didn't quite sit right. It looked like he'd forgotten how to wear it. My mother's dress was the same blue one she always wore on holidays. It used to hug her waist. Now it hung loose, like she'd slipped out of her own body and left the dress behind. I wore a button-up shirt he had ironed for me. I remember that because of the way he handed it to me, folded neatly, like it was a peace offering. But there was no peace. We sat in the back pew. My father's hand kept twitching like it wanted to reach for something,
but couldn't remember. During the hymns he mouthed the words but didn't make a sound. When the preacher spoke about forgiveness, my mother's lips pressed into a line so thin it almost disappeared. I watched her, not him. She didn't cry, but her eyes glazed over like she wasn't in the room anymore. Like maybe she was somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere alone. Afterward, we went to the diner near the edge of town, the kind with cracked red booths and a jukebox that never worked. My father ordered a coffee and eggs over easy. My mother got toast. I didn't order anything. The waitress called him Hon. He flinched. I watched the way he stirred his coffee, slow, counterclockwise, like he was trying to rewind something. Then he looked at me and said, "You're quiet today." I shrugged. He nodded like that was fair. When we got home he went out to the garage. That was his sanctuary. A single bulb swinging from the ceiling, old car parts, sawdust, the scent of metal and rust and gasoline. That was where he was most himself, or at least the version of himself that didn't apologize for existing. I stood in the doorway for a long time before he noticed me. "You want something?" he asked, not unkindly. "I want to help," I said. He blinked, surprised, then handed me a wrench. "All right then," he said. "Hold this." We worked in silence. I held things. He adjusted bolts. He muttered under his breath. Sweat gathered at his temples. I watched his hands, still calloused, still strong. At one point he stopped and sat on the stool, lit a cigarette, stared at the concrete floor. "You ever feel like you're someone's second draft?" he said. I didn't understand. He looked at me, and in that moment, I saw him at 15. At 20 I saw the version of him that maybe wanted to be something else. An artist, a musician, a man who laughed in the rain. But instead he became this father, this ghost. "I didn't get a manual," he said. "Just made it up as I went, and fucked up most of it." I wanted to say something, anything, but I just sat down beside him. The silence felt thicker in the garage, less cruel, more honest. He looked at me again. "Sometimes I think you're the only thing I didn't ruin." I looked at the wrench in my hand, heavy, real. I didn't know if that was a blessing or a burden. That night, I woke to the sound of something falling, not loud, just enough to jolt me. I crept down the hallway and found him in the living room, on his knees beside the couch. A photo album spilled open at his feet, pictures I'd never seen before. Him in uniform, him with my mother before me, her belly round with me inside. He was crying, but not like before. This was raw, audible, the kind of sound that has teeth, like grief had clawed its way up his throat and refused to go quietly. And then he did something I will never forget. He called my name, soft, like a question. I froze. "Are you there?" he asked. I stepped into the room. He didn't look up. "I didn't know how to love right," he said. "No one showed me how." I knelt beside him, close, but not touching. "It's okay," I whispered. "I hear you." He looked at me, really looked, eyes wet, face open. That was the closest we ever were. Not when he held me as a child, not when he taught me to ride a bike or tie a knot. No, it was there, on the carpet, surrounded by photographs and silence and the sound he made when he cried. That night, for the first time, I didn't fear his sadness. I shared it. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying the moment again and again. His face, his voice, the tremble in it, the way the photo album smelled of mildew and aftershave. Something had changed, not fixed, not healed, just shifted, like a stone moved slightly from a wound so it could bleed properly. And I knew we were heading towards something. I just didn't know if it was a reckoning or a goodbye. It was February when the storm came, one of those sudden Midwestern tempests that rolls in like a war sky, bruised and growling, wind like it's trying to peel the skin off the world. Power lines bowed and trees split open like secrets. We lost electricity around 9:40 p.m. I was 14. The house exhaled. That's what it felt like when the lights flickered and died. The whole place let go of something. The hum of the fridge gone, the TV cut mid-sentence, just darkness and the slow crawl of cold through the drywall. My mother lit candles. My father stoked the fireplace. I watched their silhouettes move through the house like ghosts reenacting a scene they never rehearsed. The flames flickered across his face, making it look older, worn, like the mask he usually wore had been peeled away by shadow. We gathered in the living room. My mother wrapped herself in an old wool blanket. My father sipped something stronger than coffee from his chipped navy thermos. I sat on the rug, watching the fire. It smelled like cedar and smoke and something older. A memory I hadn't lived but still felt. For a while we didn't Then he said, out of nowhere, "Your grandfather used to beat me." The room contracted. Even the fire seemed to go still. My mother's hand stilled on her cup. He stared straight ahead, like he wasn't talking to us. Never when anyone else was around, always the bell or the back of his hand. Once a wrench. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. He looked down at his hands, palms up. I swore I'd never touch you, no matter what. My mother whispered his name, just once, like a warning. But he kept going. I thought if I didn't hit I'd be different. I thought if I worked hard, stayed quiet, didn't drink too much, I could undo him. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. He looked at me then, really looked. But I didn't get out clean, did I? I didn't know what to say. The weight of his gaze was too much, so I looked back at the fire. You didn't hit me, I said finally. He nodded slowly. But I left bruises anyway. The silence that followed was almost holy. Then he stood and walked to the window, the storm still rattling outside like it wanted in. Sometimes I think storms are the only honest thing in the world, he said. They don't hide, they don't lie, they just come, and when they pass, things are never quite the same. He didn't say anything else that night. Later, after they went to bed, I stayed up with the fire, watching the embers crackle and fall apart, red and orange, turning to black. The storm passed just after midnight. The wind stilled. The night returned to itself, quieter now, tired. I walked through the house in the dark. I ended up in his garage. There on the workbench was a tape recorder, mine, but it had a fresh cassette in it. A note attached in his handwriting. Try talking to it. I sat down, pressed record, and for the first time I spoke. Not about him, not yet. I talked about the smell of rain, the feel of glass underfoot, the wrench in my hand, the silence in our house, and the sound he made when he cried. I didn't cry, but my voice cracked more than once. When I stopped, I rewound it, listened, and for the first time I heard myself, not a boy, not quite a man, just someone standing in the wreckage of someone else's war, trying to learn how to build. The next morning the power was back. But something was different. He was different. He made pancakes from scratch, said he hadn't done that in years. We sat at the table, all three of us, and ate without speaking, not in anger, in peace maybe, or something close to it. After breakfast he pulled on his coat and said, I've got to take a drive. I asked where. He smiled, small and tired. Someplace I've been avoiding. He didn't come back that night, or the night after. My mother waited 3 days before calling anyone. No hospitals, no accidents, no word. He was just gone. All he left behind was a thermos in the sink, and the tape recorder. I played the tape every night for weeks, listening for something I missed. A clue, a goodbye, but all I heard was my own voice, softer than I remembered, unsure, honest, and underneath it, if I listened closely enough, the faint sound of a man breathing, like he didn't want to interrupt, like he was trying one last time to stay.
3 months. That's how long it took for the weight of his absence to settle into the walls. Spring came, but the house stayed winter. Light filtered in like it didn't trust the windows. My mother moved through rooms like a sleepwalker, leaving half-sipped coffee cups in every corner. I started talking less, not out of anger, but preservation. Every word felt like a wound we didn't have the energy to clean. His boots were still by the door, his razor still on the bathroom sink. The tape recorder sat on my nightstand, and every night I pressed play. Sometimes I spoke new words into it. Sometimes I just listened. But I never erased that first tape. I couldn't. It was the last thing he gave me. People started asking questions. Teachers, neighbors, friends who hadn't yet learned how to look away. I didn't tell them anything, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what the truth was. He was gone. But not in the way people mean when they say that. He was something else now, a presence made of absence, a sound I still couldn't name. One night, I dreamed of him. He was sitting in the garage, covered in sawdust, listening to my tape. His eyes were closed, and when I walked toward him, he looked up and said, "Keep going, I'm almost finished." I woke up crying, really crying. It was the first time in my life that I cried for him without being afraid. I started walking to school instead of taking the bus. I liked the quiet, the crunch of gravel, the smell of thawing earth and old leaves. One day I found a stray dog following me, just a mutt ribs showing, limping a little, but it looked at me like it knew something, like maybe we'd both been left behind. I named it Sparky, even though it didn't have any spark at all. My mother let it stay. She didn't say much, but she knelt beside it and rubbed behind its ears, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in weeks, something like softness. On my 15th birthday she made a cake, chocolate with canned frosting. We sat at the table in silence, Then she lit a single candle and pushed it toward me. "Make a wish," she said. I didn't close my eyes. I wished he was watching. Later that night, I went through the garage. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe a note, maybe a clue. Instead, I found a box I hadn't noticed before. It was taped shut, dust-covered, heavy. Inside were things I didn't expect. Old cassette tapes, dozens, labeled in his handwriting. Dates spanning 20 years. Some marked with names I didn't recognize. Some just marked with a single word: July. Night. Dad. I brought them inside. My mother stared at them like they were ticking. "I didn't know he kept those," she said. Neither did I. I spent the next week listening, one each night. Voices. I didn't know. Sometimes music. Sometimes silence. Sometimes just the soft creak of the chair in the garage. And him breathing. And then, on the 7th tape, his voice. Not the voice I knew. Not the clipped, careful words he used with us. This voice was looser, raw. He was talking to someone named Michael. "A friend? A brother?" he said. "I think I'm breaking, not like in a movie, not dramatic, just coming apart slow, like old rope." There was a long pause. Then he said, "I want to leave, Mike, but I want to stay too. And I don't know which part of me is the real one." I played that line again and again. I don't know which part of me is the real one. I started writing letters, not to him, to myself, trying to answer the questions he never asked. Why did I stay? Why did I forgive? Why did I keep waiting? Because love isn't clean. Because pain doesn't follow rules. Because sometimes a person leaves not because they don't love you, but because they believe you'd be better off without the weight of them. And sometimes they're wrong. I don't know where he is, but I know this: he took something with him and left something behind. The sound he made when he cried. It still lives in this house, in the way the doors creak when I open them, in the way Sparky watches the window like it might bring him back, in the tapes, in the silence, and in me. I am the echo. I am the proof he existed. Even if no one else hears it, I still do. It started with a phone call, not from him, from a woman named Evelyn. She said she found my number tucked inside an old manual typewriter in a pawn shop in Iowa. Said it had a note attached. If found, let him know I still remember the sound. She didn't elaborate. I was 15, sitting at the kitchen table with a pencil in my hand, and no intention of doing homework. My mother was at work. Sparky was asleep under the table. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer, but something in me, a muscle tuned by grief, said I had to. Her voice was soft, older, hesitant. She told me she used to know my father, not in the way people politely phrase affairs. No, she used the word knew like it meant everything. His rhythms, his silences, the way his hands trembled when he drank too fast. "He talked about you all the time," she said, "about how you listened more than you spoke, said you had ears like a musician." I didn't know what to say. My throat was thick with the weight of something old and unspeakable. She told me she hadn't seen him in over a year, that he left things behind, tapes, books, letters, and that he had been searching. For what? She didn't know, just that he'd grown quiet again, that he said he was heading east. Before she hung up, she said, "You're not forgotten." I don't know if that helps, but it's true. I sat at the table for a long time after that. Sparky pressed his head into my knee. I think he knew. Dogs always do. That night I took the tape recorder outside. There was no wind, no moon, just the steady breath of the earth sleeping. I pressed record. "Dad," I said. It was the first time I'd said that word aloud since he left. "I heard from someone who heard you. She said you remember the sound. I hope that's true. I hope it means something still echoes. I don't know if you'll hear this or if you're near, or if you're someone else now, but I want you to know, I remember too." I paused. Let the silence talk. It doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It just hums, like static on the line, like something trying to come through. I ended the recording. Played it back. Just once. The next day I mailed a copy of the tape to the return address Evelyn left me. Weeks passed. Nothing came, but something in me felt lighter, like a window opened in a room I didn't know was sealed. I started recording everything. The way the mailbox creaked when it opened, Sparky's slow exhale when he dreamed, my mother singing under her breath while washing dishes, a song I hadn't heard since I was a child. I pieced together a life through fragments, through echo. One afternoon, I came home to find a small envelope on my bed. No stamp, no handwriting, just my name in block letters.
Inside was a cassette, unlabeled, hands shaking. I slid it into the recorder. Silence, then breath, rustling, the sound of someone struggling to begin, then his voice. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this will reach you. I don't even know if I have the right. But if you're hearing this, a pause, then maybe I'm not too late. I froze, every hair on my body lifted. I've been trying to find a way back, he said. Not to the house, to the boy I used to carry, to the sound you made when you laughed. I carry it with me, still. There was a hitch in his voice, the start of the sound, and I cry. Sometimes, not in garages, not behind closed doors, just wherever I am. I let it come now. I think of you, of what I lost, of what I might still find. The tape clicked to an end. I sat there for hours, holding the recorder, heart pounding like I was 15 and 5 and 1 all at once. He was alive, somewhere, and listening. That night I made a new tape. No word, just the sound of our house breathing, the creak of the stairs, the rattle of the wind, my own breath in the dark, and at the end I whispered, "Come home, or let me find you. I don't need you to be whole, I just need you to stay real." Then I waited, still waiting. But now, there's a voice on the line, and the static has turned into music. I found his handwriting again, not on a letter, not on a tape. This time, it was scrawled on the inside cover of a paperback novel I'd never seen before, The Old Man and the Sea, wedged between two broken chairs in the attic. It smelled like dust and wood rot. The spine was cracked, the pages had curled in the damp. The message was short, barely legible. "There's a lake north of here, past the old mill. I used to sit there when the world got too loud. I wonder if it remembers me." No signature, no date, but it was him. I read it again and again, my fingers trembling with a kind of fever I didn't recognize. Hope, maybe, or obsession. I traced the words with my thumb until the ink began to smudge. It took me 3 days to find the place. I told my mother I needed a break, a solo hike. She looked at me like she wanted to stop me, but her eyes softened. "Take Sparky," she said. "He hates goodbyes." The lake wasn't on any map. I had to ask around. Old men at diners, gas station clerks, the kind of people who hold on to secrets because no one else wants them. And then I found it, a clearing at the end of a rutted path. The trees bowed low, whispering like conspirators. The lake stretched wide, silent and silver under a pale sky. Not beautiful, not remarkable, but it felt holy. Sparky ran to the edge, sniffed the water, then lay down like he'd always belonged there. There was a bench, a single plank of wood, nailed between 2 stones. I sat on the underside of the bench. Someone had carved words with a knife. I listened. That was all. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but what I felt was deeper than tears. Something like recognition, like a mirror held up in the quiet. I pressed record on the tape deck, let it roll. The birds, the breeze, the sound of my own pulse in my ears. Then I said, "I found your lake." Silence. "It remembers you." When I came home, I didn't speak about it, not to my mother, not to anyone, but something in me had shifted. A door cracked open somewhere I didn't know existed. I started sleeping better. The next tape came a week later. Same handwriting, same envelope. Inside only a few words. "Leave the next one by the tree with the broken bell." I knew exactly where he meant. It was an old playground on the edge of town. We used to go there when I was little. He'd push me on the swings and hum Sinatra tunes under his breath. There was a tree near the fence that once held a bell for kids to ring when their turn was over. It had rusted, cracked, and fallen. Only the chain remained, like a throat waiting to be heard. I left the tape there the next morning, tucked into a plastic bag beneath a rock. Every part of me trembled. That night, I dreamed of him again. Not broken, not crying, just sitting at the lake, barefoot, eyes closed, hands open on his knees. A man trying to feel the weight of being alive. When I woke, the house felt warmer. My mother was humming again. She made pancakes. We didn't talk about him, but he was there, in the smell of batter, in the butter melting on the stove, in the rhythm of her foot tapping against the linoleum. A few days later, I returned to the tree. The tape was gone, but a new one had taken its place. On it, a message. "I'm not ready yet, but I'm closer." I played it every night. It wasn't much, just those words. His breath, the sound of gravel beneath his shoes, the faint whistle of a tune I half remembered, but it was enough. He was moving toward me, and I had followed the map he didn't mean to draw. And maybe, just maybe, he was following mine too. Spring deepened, green and thick, and unforgiving. Everything was blooming, including the ache in my chest, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It had changed shape, spread out, softened, like moss growing over a grave. Still there, still sacred, but not bleeding. I kept going back to the lake, not every day, but when the noise inside me got too loud, Sparky would hop into the passenger seat, like he knew the way better than I did. We'd sit in silence, him curled at my feet, me listening to the water move like breath against the shore. One afternoon I found another note under the bench, folded carefully, dry though the air smelled of rain. I've stopped running, but I still don't know how to come home. I read it over and over, not for answers, but for the rhythm of his voice in the words, that strange cadence I knew better than my own heartbeat. I taped it inside my journal, right across from the first one he ever left me. The house was different now, not quieter, just less afraid of its own silence. My mother laughed more, short, brittle bursts, but they were real. She started painting again, landscapes, always with water in them, always under grey skies. One evening I walked past her room and saw her staring at an old photograph, him young, smiling in a way that felt like fiction now. She didn't say anything when she saw me, just nodded, like we shared a language too sacred for words. That night I recorded a new tape. I don't know if you remember, I said, but you once told me tools never lie, that you always know what they are. I think about that a lot, about how people try so hard to be something they're not, to hide what they're made for. I paused. I think I was made to listen, to remember. Maybe you were made to leave, or maybe to return. I left that tape by the tree again. Same bag, same rock. The next day it was gone. 2 days later I heard the knock, not on the front door, on the garage. I was in the kitchen, my hands went still in the sink. Sparky raised his head, ears alert. Another knock. I stepped outside. The evening was soft, orange with dusk. There he was, older, thinner, a new scar along his chin, eyes red-rimmed, but clear. He held a bag in one hand. His coat was the same one I remembered, the one he always wore on cold nights. "Hey," he said. The sound caught in the air between us, not loud, not small, just I didn't speak, just nodded. He looked at the house, then at me. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. Inside, everything felt too loud. The clock ticking, the hum of the fridge, even Sparky's tail against the floor. He sat at the table like he used to, same chair, same way he folded his hands. My mother came in a few minutes later. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't drop anything. She looked at him like he was weather, expected, uncontrollable, beautiful in the way floods are beautiful. He whispered her name. She sat across from him, then looked at me. "Let's just eat," she said. And so we did. That night after dishes, he asked if he could see the tapes. I brought him the box. He sat cross-legged on the floor like a boy, unspooling the past one cassette at a time. He laughed, once, then he cried. Not behind doors, not in secret. He let it come, and I listened, because that's what I was made to do. He stayed the night, not in their bed, on the couch. In the morning, he was still there, still breathing, still trying, and maybe that was enough. For now, he stayed, not forever, not like stories promised, but longer than I thought he would. Long enough to build something out of the silence. He mowed the lawn the next day, not because it needed it, but because he wanted to sweat, to move, to prove he could still take care of something. The sound of the engine hummed through the kitchen walls as my mother painted in the sunroom. A new canvas, blues and yellows this time, less grey. He fixed the leaky pipe under the sink. He walked Sparky. He sat on the porch and read the paper aloud like it mattered. For the first week we didn't talk about the past. We talked about the weather, about music. He told me he tried to learn guitar while he was gone but gave up. Said his hands remembered how to work, but not how to feel. Then one evening we sat in the garage together. He opened a... I didn't take one, just held the tape recorder in my lap. "I left because I was afraid," he said. "Not of you, of what I might teach you if I stayed." He stared at the concrete, at his hands. "But you learned anyway, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I pressed record. He didn't flinch. "I want to believe I can be different," he said, "but I don't think I'll ever be fixed." The garage filled with night. "You don't have to be fixed," I said. "You just have to stay." He looked at me, eyes wet, and then he laughed. Not the brittle kind, a real one, soft, surprised. "You sound like your mother." I smiled. That was the first time I liked the comparison. After that we fell into a rhythm, imperfect, uneven, but real. He didn't sleep much. Sometimes I'd wake up to find him sitting at the table, writing in a note. Once, I caught him listening to one of my tapes with his eyes closed. I asked what he heard. "Hope," he said, wrapped in static. Spring turned to summer. He found part-time work. My mother let him stay. No promises, no conditions, just a space at the table and an open window at night. I turned 16 in July. He gave me a toolbox. Inside was a note: for when things break, start with your hands. Then listen. I didn't cry when I read it. I just held it to my chest and breathed. A few weeks later, I walked into the garage and found him recording. His back was to me, his voice low. "If you're listening," he said, "I want you to know I heard you first, before the silence, before the crying. I heard the way you breathed beside my door, the way you stayed quiet so I could fall apart." I stepped back before he saw me. That was his confession, his prayer. I never asked to hear it again. Some things are meant to be caught once. In August, he packed a small bag. He said he needed to visit someone up north, just for a while. He said he'd be back. We believed him, because this time he left the tapes behind, because this time he didn't run, because this time he hugged me like a father, not like a ghost. And when I pressed my ear to his chest, I didn't hear silence. I heard the sound he made when he cried. Not pain, not grief, just a man letting go. And I knew then, he was never just the storm. He was the quiet that stayed after, the quiet I carry, the quiet I understand. And every time I hear that sound now, in wind, in water, in the hush between sentences, I answer it, not with fear, but with my voice. So he'll know I'm still here. So he'll know he's not alone. So we'll both remember, sometimes the sound a father makes when he cries is the beginning of love.